Iran's Revolutionary Guards continue to launch drones towards the commercial ships in the Gulf. And in Tehran, they're boasting. Iran defeated 2 nuclear powers. The Revolutionary Guards are celebrating and saying that Trump forced Netanyahu to stop the strikes in the Dahya neighborhood in Beirut, Lebanon. In addition, they published that we threatened the United States and issued an ultimatum. Trump was forced to obey the Iranians. And last night, the United States and Iran digitally signed the Memorandum of Understanding to end this war, with Trump signing the agreement himself. The Strait of Hormuz is opening immediately, and right now, around 500 ships are waiting for rescue orders. In addition, Iran was committed to diluting the uranium. How does this process actually work? And on the other hand, the Iranian Foreign Ministry announced in response, we will not give up the enriched nuclear material. Is Trump under pressure? Iran is issuing an ultimatum: no withdrawal from Lebanon, no agreement. And today, we will bring you the conversations that reveal the rift between Trump and Netanyahu, and we will try to understand whether this is really a crisis or not. In a very strange move, the President of the United States defended Tehran's right to hold ballistic missiles and attacked critics of this agreement, hinted at renewed bombings within 60 days, and called on Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel to restrain the activity in Lebanon. According to him, El-Shara, the former jihadist, will deal with Hezbollah better. That's the leader of Syria. So did the war expose the limits of the American power? Did the war strengthen Iran's regional status? And did it undermine the sense of security on which the strategic system of the Gulf states has relied on for decades? And while the world prepares for the ceasefire with Iran in Israel, they are already preparing the targets for the next war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. We are here on Boots on the Ground. We bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is June 18th, so let's begin. Immediately after the United States and Iran signed the agreement to end the hostilities, it was announced that the Strait of Hormuz, a vital global shipping lane, would reopen immediately. But the journey to bring the global trade back to normal is expected to take months and to face quite a few challenges. The Memorandum of Understanding that was signed between the United States and Iran is drawing sharp criticism in Jerusalem, mainly because of the economic relief, the issue of enriched uranium, and the connection that was created between the Iranian arena and Lebanon. In Tehran, they rushed to declare victory, while officials in Israel are warning that Iran is the biggest winner from this agreement. The President of the United States summed up the agreement as excellent and said, "Is it final? No. It is a memorandum of understanding. If the Iranians do not behave properly, we will immediately go back to dropping bombs straight on their heads." The IDF is preparing for a possible continuation of the war on the Iranian and the Lebanese fronts, and is revealing for the first time that previously untold details about several assassination operations. But there are several very worrying things in this agreement, especially the clause dealing with Lebanon. The Memorandum of Understanding states that the sides will work to end the military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon, and will commit to avoiding mutual military actions. In Israel, there is concern about the connection created between the Iranian arena and the Lebanese arena, and about the possibility that in the future, international pressure will be applied to limit the IDF's freedom of action in southern Lebanon. And at the same time, in Jerusalem, we emphasize that the agreement does not at this stage require an immediate withdrawal of the Israeli forces from the territory of Lebanon. At the same time, in Tehran, they did not hide their satisfaction with the developments. The Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Muhammad Bagher Ghalibaf, claimed that Iran is coming to the negotiations from a position of power and declared that a victory on the ground is the basis for negotiations. According to him, Iran succeeded in imposing a new reality in this region and now enjoys the improved status in the international arena. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Bagahi referred to the conditions of the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed with the United States and claimed that if Israeli strikes in Lebanon continue, this will be considered a violation of the agreement. According to him, the 60 days of negotiations began with the renewal of the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding. He also referred to the ballistic missiles and said, "Our missiles do not like being talked about, and their purpose is to be launched, not to be discussed. So our defensive capabilities will not be up for discussion," end quote, by the Iranian. And at the same time, the media in Iran published a photo of President Masoud Pezeshkian holding a signed copy of the memorandum. And from here, from the Holy Land, Israel, the agreement with Iran looks very bad. And still, it must be said, Israel has created a safer Middle East. Even though the deal with Iran is controversial, Hamas and Hezbollah have been weakened, and Israel is now in an improved security position. But it must prepare for the next round and preserve the military and the intelligence readiness. We will already open this issue with our senior expert on Middle Eastern affairs, Mati Shoshani, who, by the way, has his birthday today. So he's a bit even more senior than what it was before. But before we begin, these are the 14 points of the Memorandum of Understanding, according to Global News Agency. 1. Iran, the United States, and their allies commit to stopping the fighting on all fronts, including Lebanon. 2. Iran and the United States will respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. 3. Iran and the United States will conduct negotiations for 60 days towards a final agreement, which can be extended with the approval of both sides. 4. The United States will remove the naval blockade immediately after the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding and will withdraw its forces from the area within 30 days of a final agreement. 5. Iran will work to renew the movement of commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz immediately after the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding. 6. The United States and its regional partners commit to creating a plan to establish a $300 billion fund for the reconstruction of Iran as part of the final agreement. 7. If a final agreement is reached, the United States will work to remove all sanctions against Iran, including sanctions from the United Nations Security Council and the International Atomic Energy Agency. 8. Iran will repeat its commitment that it will never produce nuclear weapons. Iran and the United States agreed that the fate of the enriched materials will be settled in the final agreement. 9. Iran and the United States will agree that until a final agreement is reached, the status quo in the Iranian nuclear program will be maintained, and that the United States will not impose new sanctions on Tehran. 10. The United States commits that until the signing of the final agreement, it will refrain from enforcing the sanctions imposed on the export of Iranian crude oil and petroleum products. 11. The United States commits that Iran's frozen assets will be fully released. 12. Iran and the United States will agree on the creation of a mechanism to monitor the implementation of the final agreement if it is signed. 13. Iran and the United States will commit that after the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding, they will conduct negotiations on a final agreement. 14. The final agreement will be approved through a binding resolution of the United States and the United Nations Security Council. So, we will already go into all the military view of this entire situation and try to understand whether this Memorandum of Understanding is not actually a ticking time bomb that could cause the Middle East to start burning again in 60 days. And meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, the IDF continues to operate against the Hamas terrorist organization. 2 terrorists who participated in the massacre and held hostages were eliminated. The IDF eliminated in precise strikes Muhammad Nimroti from the Hamas terrorist organization and Mawaya Aidi from the Islamic Jihad. The 2 raided into Israel on October 7th. They were involved in holding hostages in tunnels and posed a concrete danger to the forces. I'm Yair Pinto. With me today is Mati Shoshani, who has his birthday. And we are here on Boots on the Ground. We're bringing the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and about the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible, click on the subscribe button, and most importantly, do not forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts to get our view through our eyes of what it's like to live in Israel under war. Our senior correspondent of Middle Eastern affairs, first of all, happy birthday. Hope you're celebrating your birthday today, other than coming live with me.
I had a lovely morning with my wife, and now I'm with you, Yair.
Well, second best. What can you do?
As you said, I'm even more of a senior correspondent now.
Exactly. So, Mati, did Iran really win here, or did it only manage to turn a military threat into an agreement that saves its situation politically and also economically?
Well, is there really winning in this type of warfare? I don't think so anymore. In the type of war that we've been fighting in recent decades, asymmetrical warfare, proxy warfare, I'm trying to think, and I love history, as do you. When's the last time that a war was decisively won? And in the sense of 2 sides actually admitting that one of them won, I'm trying to think back when the last time something like that happened that didn't end in a prolonged civil war, that didn't end, in something very, very violent over a very long period of time. And I can't think of something in recent decades, realistically speaking. Most wars nowadays are or between guerrilla organizations, there's civil wars, they're asymmetrical warfare, which is the war here between a state nation, the United States, that fights according to the rules, and a terrorist nation, Iran, that fights against or fights according to a completely separate set of rules, the rules of terrorism, the rules of 12th Shia Islam, the rules of the Ayatollahs and the IRGC. They don't fight by the same kind of rules. There never was really a situation here where Iran would come and say, you know what, US, you've beat us on the military battlefield. You're the better one. You built the better army. Let's sign a peace agreement. You park your train here. We'll park our train there. And we'll do it the good old ways. That doesn't exist. When has that happened in recent decades? The fact that the US is able to get to an agreement, and I say this with an asterisk, I have a lot of criticism of what this agreement has in it. But I'd say that despite that, the fact that they were able to even reach an agreement with the likes of the IRGC in Iran is a huge achievement. I need people to think about this for just a second. The leadership in Iran is the kind of organization, the kind of people that are willing to watch the world burn and do that at the expense of everyone, including their own people, to promote their radical religious ideology. That's the organization that leads that country. It's the kind of organization that in January of this year killed tens of thousands of its own people to stop a public or political uprising within their country. And they did that in several days, not over a prolonged season. They were willing to kill hundreds of thousands if needed. That's the kind of regime. And I say that because the former leader, the deceased Ayatollah, said he would do that to his own people. But it gets more complicated than that. Iran sits on a chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian regime has proven very hard to overthrow, at least for the current situation politically within Iran. And the US, I think, from the US perspective, did what it needed to do. President Trump promised that he wouldn't take the US on another forever war kind of adventure, another Afghanistan, another Iraq, the kind of wars that fathers and sons both fight in the same war. And he's been true to his word in that sense. President Trump said he would be able to deliver for the Gulf states that rely on U.S. protection. And if the Strait of Hormuz actually opens up, then he is delivering. From the Israeli perspective, things are more complicated. From the Iranian perspective, the fact that there's a lot of unknowns right now in this agreement What happens with their proxies in reality? What counts as Iranian aggression? If they don't fully dismantle their nuclear program, they only partially dismantle it. Are they violating the agreement? It's unknown. And when you think about those different aspects in this agreement, you understand that it's one, it's complicated. Two, there is no absolute win here, not for the US and not for the Iranians. And three, you need to remember that this is a prolonged war against a kind of ideology that always comes back to warfare, that always comes back to violence. The only way to sign a long-lasting peace agreement with the Iranian regime is to change the regime. Think of post-World War II Germany. Think of post-World War II Japan. How do they sign long-term agreements? They change the government, and they have the government and the people publicly repent for what they did under the past regime. That's what it takes to really change this kind of situation in the long term. So look, it's not perfect. It's an achievement to reach an agreement, but it's not enough. It's an achievement to open the Strait of Hormuz, but it's not enough. It's an achievement, hopefully, to receive much of the enriched uranium, but that's not everything. We need to make sure they long-term don't go back to it. That requires supervisors. We need to make sure that they don't manufacture ballistic missiles that now reach 3,000 miles and then 4,000 miles. It's a never-ending battle because the Iranians regime DNA is that of destruction, of proxy warfare, and of paying proxies to fight their own wars. They did so in Lebanon and Gaza and in Yemen, and they've tried to in countless other countries. That is their DNA. It's not changing tomorrow or the next day. And for now, this is what we have. And as much as we're not fans of this agreement altogether or in its entirety, when you look at it from the American perspective, this is what was necessary. They needed to have an agreement. They need to put an end to the hostilities. They need to stabilize the markets. They need to lower the price of oil. President Trump is not only worrying about the Strait of Hormuz, he's worrying about the midterms in the US. He's worrying about approval ratings and how that's going to affect people running for Congress or Senate or even in state legislature throughout the US now and in years to come. These things affect public perception. They affect the results long-term in democratic elections. The Iranians are playing a game that is dirty, it's evil, it's complicated. And sometimes when we're dealing with those kind of regimes, you get what the best you can get for and you move on. And that's sort of where we are right now, and at least in my opinion. And I want to add one last point. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, continue. Don't worry. Yeah.
No, I wanted to just say from our perspective, and we need to say this openly because I know we'll get into asking the question of what about the U.S.-Israel relationship. Israel and the U.S. have different agendas here. We're not the same country. Unlike what people, in the far left or far right like saying Israel doesn't control Washington and Washington doesn't control Israel. We're allies that align on certain interests and misalign on others. The U.S. has different political needs, different geopolitical needs. President Trump, White House needs different things than the state of Israel does, and Prime Minister Netanyahu and his cabinet, they need different things than President Trump does. We don't always align on everything. We're fighting different wars from different perspectives, and most of the time we align and we're great together. Sometimes the agreement isn't exactly what Israel needs, and what Israel needs isn't exactly what the U.S. needs, and that's fine. That's how friendships and relationships can be. That's realistic.
Yeah, definitely, Mati. And you talked about the proxies. So does this agreement actually protect the Hezbollah terrorist organization in Lebanon? And every time Israel acts against this terrorist organization, does it become an international incident that Israel is causing this agreement to be violated? Because that's what I'm, hearing the critics being about this agreement specifically in Israel now.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, that's my biggest concern is that Lebanon is tied into the ceasefire agreement, and it's confusing. So the wording of the agreement that's been released over the last 24 hours indicates that the ceasefire includes also Lebanon. The ceasefire includes all of Lebanon, and that the goal is, and let me pull up my notes here. This was CNN last night. It said something along the lines, the final deal will confirm the permanent termination of the war on all fronts, including in Lebanon, and other provisions in this paragraph. And when you look at that, you ask yourself the question, what does this really mean? Well, we have a clue in what J.D. Vance, the vice president, said yesterday to CBN News, our good friends. He said to them, and thank you, Tomo, for sending me this note as we're here live. He says, We're not saying necessarily that Israel needs to withdraw from southern Lebanon. He clearly says that.
Really?
What really happens long term? Yeah, he said that yesterday. What really happens? What does a ceasefire really require? I'm not sure we know, Yael. I'm sure the Iranians are going to demand that hostilities stop in Lebanon. I'm guessing. I'm not saying this from a place of authority. I'm guessing that the U.S. will expect some kind of ceasefire to also take place in Lebanon, but not necessarily that Israel needs to withdraw from Lebanon. And then what does that really look like, in the day after that agreement is signed? Israel has some kind of security parameter, maybe in the Litani River or stream, area, maybe on some of the mountain ranges. Maybe we have several like FOBs, forward operating bases, in different key locations throughout Lebanon. And then we're able to hold defensive positions. And then you ask yourself the question, well, if Hezbollah attacks Israel, what does Israel do? If Israel retaliates to Hezbollah provocations, is that a violation of the ceasefire or is it not? It's not entirely clear. I'd say it is a very valid point of concern for the state of Israel, for the people of Israel. And I'd also say this, Israel has been vocal, not in Prime Minister Netanyahu's voice, but in the voice of our Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, who, my guess, consulted with the Prime Minister's office before saying this, who says openly, we're not withdrawing from southern Lebanon, and Israel maintains the right to defend itself against Hezbollah. I'd say this, I've spent a lot of time in the IDF, so have you in recent years. The IDF is clear that we're not making the same mistake that we made before October the 7th. We're the ones protecting our borders. We are the ones creating a security parameter within our enemy states or entities, countries, not inside Israel. The citizens of northern Israel, of Metula, of Kiryat Shmona, of the kibbutzim and moshavim on the northern border, they should not be the physical barrier to Hezbollah entering into this country. The barrier should be on the back of Hezbollah-controlled territories, which should not be given them back to them, well, from my perspective, ever until Hezbollah ceases to exist, until there's a solution in Lebanon that can replace Hezbollah. And my sense is that the government of Israel is very strong on that, very public on that, very clear on the fact that we're not leaving the defense of Israel to some vague description of an international peacekeeper force or whatever. We've been down that road. We've seen with our own eyes repeatedly in this war the tunnels built under UN buildings. We've seen during the civil war in Syria, the UN peacekeepers and observers and the forces that are supposed to prevent these kind of things from happening, fleeing into Israel to watch what's happening in Syria or in Lebanon from within Israel because they're not able to deal with that problem. And that's not to say something about specifically those different UN forces. Their hands are tied in the way they operate there. Hezbollah is a vicious terrorist organization. They've threatened UN entities. They've attacked UN entities within Lebanon and previously within Syria, not Hezbollah, but other terrorist elements. And when you look at that situation, we're not going to let that happen. We're not going to let our borders be overrun by a terrorist organization. We're not going to rely on who knows what international peacekeeping force to protect it. It's going to be us. Sadly, possibly personally, me and you, and I hope not our children, but the next generation of younger Israelis protecting our borders against these enemies until those enemies cease to exist. And again, the solution long-term is political. The solution long-term is diplomatic. It's not in warfare. The only way to long-term solve what's happening here in the land, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza, is by creating a different government, a different political situation altogether. That is a long-term solution.
Well, definitely, Mati. So we'll see what happens. And I think that the next 60 days will be very interesting. But as we just reported, even in the last hours, Iran keeps launching drones. Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, keeps moving, keeps reorganizing, keeps attacking our troops. And the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip is also becoming more powerful, recruiting young recruits out of the Palestinian population, some of them as young as 13, teenagers. And it seems like ceasefire is just something for the headlines, not something that we feel or see here on the ground. But we'll keep praying and we'll keep updating all of you. And thank you very much, Mati Shoshani.
Do we have another minute, Yael? Because I want to respond to that. And I'll say this. The Iranians have tried to create an equation in the last 2 weeks, an equation under which there's a ceasefire in Lebanon, but it only applies to Israel. And every time Israel responds strongly to Hezbollah or has an opportunity to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure, they'll claim that it's us creating acts of aggression. But it isn't. We're fighting against an army. Hezbollah before October the 7th was, and on a nation level, forget a terrorist organization, they had an army bigger than most European countries. As far as active duty terrorists or soldiers trained in that army, I'm trying to think if there is an army in Europe. Maybe now Poland in Eastern Europe, you have several countries, Poland, Ukraine, obviously, but not Western European countries that have 90,000, 100,000 deployed soldiers. Who has that right now in Europe? That was Hezbollah, the terrorist organization. And the Iranians were trying to create this equation where we have to walk on eggshells when Hezbollah is attacking us. And I need to say this in a lot of respect to our government. The Israeli government, and I say this against the advice of the US government, created a very clear line in the sand. And the line says, absolutely not. We will operate in Lebanon with impunity. We will operate against Hezbollah freely, uninhibited by what Iran demands or what Iran threatens. And if you think you can threaten us, every threat that you create will be answered with a much more substantial attack. And it worked. Iran made a big threat. They sent 23 or 24 ballistic missiles at Israel. One or two of them were from Houthi-controlled Yemen. The rest were from Iran. All of them were intercepted outside of Israel. Israel responded seriously and severely against Iranian targets in Iran. And the next time Iran made that threat, they didn't have the guts or the ability to fire that level of attack against Israel because they knew what was coming their way. And that shows, I think, a learning curve on our government side, where we're saying, look, say what you want, Iran, try to create this equation however you want. If you threaten us in the way it relates to operating against Hezbollah, you are going to receive a direct hit. We're not attacking in Lebanon when you threaten or attack us. If you threaten or attack us in Lebanon, we're going all the way back to the source of the terrorist attack, which is the Ayatollahs and the IRGC in Tehran. We're coming to get you in your home base. No more proxy on proxy warfare. We're fighting against you at your home base, at home, so you pay the price for what you did. And I'd say that equation has worked in recent weeks, and I hope we continue to doing that. So Iran doesn't change an equation, doesn't create a situation where Israel can't freely operate within Lebanon. That would be catastrophic for Israeli security.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani. This definitely helped us better understand what we're dealing with. Continue spreading the truth. Share this content with as many people as possible. Click the subscribe button and look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts. Now let's talk about Meir Panim, our partner that gives food to the needy people in Israel. So their branch in Dimona was hit after a direct missile strike from Iran targeted that area. The building suffered severe structural damage and is now completely unsafe to use. What was once a place of warmth, dignity, and daily meals is now filled with broken glass, debris, and instability. More than 470 residents were displaced in this attack, and thousands of homes were affected. And right in the middle of all of it, Meir Panim, which is a lifeline for so many, was deeply impacted. Inside the building, ceilings are at risk of collapse. Electrical and plumbing systems have been destroyed. Entire sections of the facility need to be rebuilt from the ground up. And yet, the meals haven't stopped. Even without a building, even in a crisis, the team continues to provide food every single day to those who depend on it. But emergency operations are not enough. We need to rebuild, not just to restore what was lost, but to bring this place back to life, which is a fully functioning, dignified space where people can once again receive meals with respect, consistency, and care. Government support may cover part of the damage, but it will not restore the heart of this place. That depends on us. So if you want to stand with the people of Israel, especially those that were attacked in the southern community of Dimona, if you want to help rebuild this place of hope, we invite you to donate today. Go to bless-israel.org. That's bless-israel.org and be part of restoring Meir Panim, because together we can rebuild. And from the moment that the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran entered into force, the real test moved from the diplomatic table to the sea. In the Persian Gulf, commercial ships are still moving with caution. Some have been waiting for months. Some are waiting for orders. And according to the American officials, the Revolutionary Guards are still launching drones at night towards the shipping routes in the Strait of Hormuz. And that's exactly the question that we need to ask now. If the agreement has already been signed, why are the Iranians still testing the line in the air and at sea? The agreement is supposed to open up the Strait of Hormuz immediately. This is not just another shipping lane on the map. It is one of the most important checkpoints in the global economy. A massive share of the world's oil and gas moves through this strait. And that's why every small drone over the water immediately becomes a global event. On the ground, the picture is much more complicated than the headlines. The headlines are saying the Strait of Hormuz has opened. But according to estimates, hundreds of ships are still waiting in the area, along with thousands of crew members. Some vessels have been standing for so long that they will need inspections, maintenance, underwater hull cleaning, and sometimes even security escort before returning to full movement. In other words, Trump can announce that Hormuz is open. Iran can promise free passage, but an insurance company, a captain of a tanker, and the owner of a shipping fleet are all asking one simple question. Who guarantees that the next drone will not come towards us? American military forces in the area continue to operate against the threat. And according to reports, Iranian drones have been intercepted before they were able to hit the commercial ships. American naval vessels or crew members. This is no longer only diplomacy. This is a diplomacy that survives only as long as the defense systems are working. And here is the important point. Iran does not need to sink a ship in order to influence the world. It is enough for Iran to make shipping companies hesitate. It is enough to make insurance companies raise prices. It's enough to inject uncertainty into the energy markets. That's how Tehran tries to turn fear into a bargaining tool. And at the same time, in Iran, they're celebrating. Regime spokesmen and officials in the Revolutionary Guards are presenting the agreement as a victory. They say that Trump was forced to obey. They claim that Iran defeated two nuclear powers. And above all, they're trying to convince the Iranian public that the regime did not surrender, but forced its own will on Washington. But behind the celebrations, there's also a simple truth. Iran took heavy blows. The Israeli Air Force, the American military, and the intelligence activities around the Iranian arena hit infrastructure, forces, and the regime's sense of immunity. That's why Tehran now needs an image of victory. It needs to tell the story that it was not saved from pressure, but defeated it. This is exactly where we need to understand the Memorandum of Understanding. It's not a full peace agreement. It is a temporary framework. It gives the sides 60 days to reach a final agreement. During that time, the fighting is supposed to stop. The naval blockade is supposed to be lifted. Iran is supposed to receive the ability to renew oil exports, and the discussion over the nuclear program moves to the next stage. The problem is what remains open. According to the published text of the memorandum, Iran commits not to produce nuclear weapons, but its enriched material does not leave Iran. According to the understandings, the basic method is to dilute the material inside Iran under the IAEA supervision. This is a critical point. Uranium dilution sounds like a dry technical term, but its meaning is clear. Iran enriched uranium to a high level, around 60%, far beyond what is needed for a civilian power plant. Nuclear weapons usually require a level of around 90%. In dilution, the enriched material is mixed with natural or diluted uranium in order to lower the concentration of uranium-235 to a civilian level, around 3 to 5%. On paper, this moves Iran further away from a bomb, but in practice, in Israel, they're asking two different questions. Who supervises it? Where is the material located? How much it is really diluted? And what happens if Iran hides parts of its quantity? The Israeli concern is not theoretical. Israel knows that the Iranian method very well. Sign, buy time, receive relief, preserve capabilities, and then move forward somewhere else, underground, far from the cameras. That's why in Jerusalem, they're not impressed only by the sentence that Iran will not develop nuclear weapons. In Israel, they're checking the mechanism, the access to the sites, the intelligence, and the freedom of action if the agreement collapses. And there is another clause that especially worries Israel, and that's Lebanon. The Memorandum of Understanding includes a commitment to end hostilities on all fronts, including Lebanon. From the perspective of Iran and Hezbollah, this is an opportunity that they're trying to take IDF activity in southern Lebanon and turn it into a card in the nuclear negotiations with the United States. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman has already made it clear that if Israel continues to strike in Lebanon, and if the IDF does not withdraw, then, from Tehran's perspective, the agreement could be cancelled. In simple words, Iran is trying to tell the Americans, you want quiet in Hormuz, you want a nuclear deal, pressure Israel in Lebanon. And that is exactly the trap. Hezbollah fires, threatens, rebuilds infrastructure, and tries to return to the border. Israel operates against command centers, weapons, launchers, warehouses, and communication operatives. Then, Iran comes and says every Israeli action against Hezbollah is a problem for the nuclear agreement. From Israel's perspective, that is unacceptable. Lebanon is not a prize that Hezbollah receives after violating a ceasefire. The IDF's freedom of action in the north is not a clause that Iran can sell in Switzerland. And if there is a threat to the citizens of northern Israel, Israel cannot wait for a mediator in Qatar or an official in Washington. This is where the tension between Trump and Netanyahu comes in. We need to say this precisely. It does not necessarily mean Trump has turned against Israel. It also does not mean that the alliance has collapsed. But there is clear clash of interests. Trump wants to end the war, open shipping lanes, reduce economic pressure, and present a major agreement. Israel looks at the same reality and asks, what happens the day after? Trump was angry about the strikes in Lebanon. He asked why buildings were being blown up. He said that Netanyahu sometimes gets carried away. He also said that Israel needs to defend itself, but to do it with good judgment. From Washington's perspective, every Israeli strike in Lebanon that is too large could complicate the agreement with Iran. But from Jerusalem's perspective, every such restriction could turn Hezbollah into an actor that receives immunity through Tehran. And that's not the whole story. Trump also said unusual things about Iran's ballistic missiles. He argued that there is no logic in other countries in this region having missiles while Iran is not allowed to have even one missile. That is a statement that deeply worries Israel's security establishment because ballistic missiles are not a side issue in the Iranian program. They're part of the central threat. A nuclear program without missiles is one problem. Missiles without a nuclear program are another problem. But Iran with nuclear knowledge, enriched material, and missile industry, and terror proxies around Israel, that's already the full strategic picture. And one moment before we continue, if you want to understand this war from the ground, not through slogans and not through empty headlines, follow Boots on the Ground on TBN Israel on our YouTube channel. Hit the like, share this video, let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe. If you want to see life in Israel through our eyes, look us up on our social media accounts, Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani. And while the diplomats are talking, the IDF continues the work. In Gaza, the Air Force eliminated 2 terrorists who participated in the October 7th massacre. One of them, Mohammed Saeed Ahmed Nimroti. He was a platoon commander in the Hamas terrorist organization and raided into the Israeli territory. Throughout the war, he was involved in holding hostages inside Hamas tunnels, and recently he had been advancing terror plans against the IDF troops. In another strike in the central part of the Gaza Strip, Mawia Suleiman Sakr Aidi, a platoon commander in the Islamic Jihad, was eliminated. He was amongst the terrorists who raided Kibbutz Be'eri and later took part in planting explosive devices against the IDF soldiers. These two eliminations reminded us of one thing. Even when the entire world is focused on Iran, the war against the terrorist infrastructure in Gaza is not over. In the north as well, the IDF continues to prepare. Inside the Air Force, there is a unit that builds the target bank. This is the quiet work behind every strike, gathering intelligence, choosing the munition, planning the route, calculating the damage, and identifying the precise way to hit the target without hitting what should not be hit. So a senior official in the Air Force in the target bank unit described the preparation against Iran and Lebanon. And according to him, strike plans against Iran's power stations and oil industry are already ready. In the political echelon, if they give the order, the Air Force knows how to act and execute. In the Dacha neighborhood in Beirut, a hub for Hezbollah, the situation is even more sensitive. Israel has strike plans for many buildings. But right now, because of American pressure and the sensitivity surrounding the agreement, Beirut is almost blocked from action. That does not mean that Hezbollah has become safe. It means that every decision is no longer only a military decision. It is also a diplomatic, American, Iranian, and Lebanese decision. And that may be the heart of today's story. Israel won many military points. Hamas has weakened. Hezbollah has weakened. Iran was hit. But these military achievements are now standing opposite a diplomatic table where Iran is trying to achieve with money, time, and words what it failed to achieve with fire. The Gulf states see this very clearly. They were not a direct side in this war, but they understand that their stability rests on a vulnerable maritime route, on an American umbrella that's not always predictable, and on an Iranian neighbor that can threaten the global economy without conquering even 1 meter. That is why the Gulf, they are already speaking differently. Less imported security, more independent capabilities, and more channels of dialogue with Tehran, not out of trust, but out of fear. Iran understands that fear. It survived. From the Iran's regime perspective, survival itself is an achievement. The nuclear program was not fully dismantled. The missile program was not eliminated. Hezbollah did not disappear. And the regime in Tehran is still standing before the world and saying, talk to us, or the sea will close again. But Israel also learned something, that Israel cannot build its security on the mood of the White House. It needs the alliance with the United States for sure. It needs coordination. It needs strategic depth. But in the end, if Iran breaks out towards a nuclear weapon, if Hezbollah moves closer to the border, and if the Revolutionary Guards try to turn a temporary agreement into a springboard for the next war, Israel will need to be ready to act on its own. Right now, this agreement buys time. The question is who will use that time better? Iran in order to recover, or Israel in order to expose and prepare and prevent? Because in the Middle East, a ceasefire is not always the end of the war. Sometimes it is only the silence in which both sides count missiles, money, and days until the next round. And if Iran is already celebrating victory while it continues testing the line at sea, that will happen. What will happen when the 60-day clock actually reaches zero? Let me know what you think about this situation in the comments. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about this. And in the meantime, keep spreading the truth. Follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to hit that subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another Boots on the Ground update on TBN Israel, our YouTube channel. Also, look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts, and pray for the situation. Pray that, first of all, the world will see the danger of the terrorist organization Hezbollah. Pray for the IDF soldiers. Pray for wisdom to our leaders. Pray for the negotiation teams not to be deceived by Iran. Pray for the fact that the uranium will be diluted, that the Iranians will not be super close to a nuclear bomb. And above all, pray for the Iranian people. Pray for the Lebanese people. These are two people groups that have been hijacked by the Ayatollah regime. They are colonizing Lebanon. Yes, the Ayatollah regime and the Revolutionary Guards are colonizing the state of Lebanon. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. It's not representing the Lebanese people. Pray for the Lebanese people to get rid of this colonizing threat called the Revolutionary Guards of Iran. And keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.